Okay, well, I'm Alex McClintock. I'm a Sydney street photographer. I had an iced latte this morning. It was a little watered down because I was waiting for him for a little bit. But it was good at Primary Coffee Roasters here in King's Cross, where I like to shoot.
And your camera?
Yeah, I'm shooting on a Fuji X-T3.
Fantastic.
Pretty much shoot almost all the time on this 27mm lens, which is sort of like a 41 equivalent, more or less, which is like a bit of a weird focal length, but it kind of works. It's like sort of in between a nifty 50 and a classic 35mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's it. Awesome. Well, I actually want to pick your brain on the focal length. Do you want to start walking, Alex?
Yeah, that's good.
I know I was going to ask you something else in the beginning, but focal length, 41mm. Tell me about that, because I'm curious to understand.
Don't quote me on that. It might be like 43.
You're probably correct. Yeah, it's around the 40 mark. But you say it works for you. Can you help me understand why that focal length?
Well, I think when I started shooting, I started shooting with the gear that I had, and one of the things I had was a 50mm lens, so classic.
Yeah.
So I got used to shooting at that focal length, where you can't really be quite as in the action as you would be with like a 35 or a 28. You just sort of have to stand back a little and pick your spots.
Right.
And when I got this X-T3, I used to shoot on a Canon R5, which I was also using for my work, where I do videography and stuff. So I wanted a camera. I don't have that much money, so I just wanted one camera that would do everything.
Yeah. And
so I got a Canon R5, and discovered that getting a big beast like that out on the street is kind of hard. You stand out. You look like you're bird watching. You definitely don't look as cool because you can't do the cool strap thing. It's like, so I was working with the 50, and then when I got this X-T3, it came with a kit lens and
the zoom kit lens, the
zoom,
the 18 to 55. Yeah. Okay.
And then also quite a nice telephoto, which might be like a 75, which is like, I don't know what equivalent.
100 and something, yeah. Okay.
But I needed something that was a bit wider, and also the kit lens quality is not very good, so I wanted a nice prime. And I did a bit of research and did a good Facebook marketplace crawl and found this, which I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I'm used to shooting on 50. I've wanted for a while to shoot at a wider focal length. So it seemed like a
compromise. Yeah, okay.
And then I also just love that it's such a tiny
It is lens. That. I love that. It's very small. Little pancake lens.
So I'm like at the, sort of the opposite of what I looked like when I had the R5. I feel so compact and sleek.
That's probably my favorite thing about having a small camera is just so much more convenient than the mental energy of getting a big, heavy camera out of your bag is just too much.
And even the physical energy, I had the R5 on a wrist strap.
Oh my gosh.
I was on, I'd be on holidays and I'd be walking around all day taking photos. And at the end of the day, I'd done my shoulder, they're heavy.
You get fizzy after that, yeah. Awesome. Hey, help us know a bit more about what got you into photography. We were just talking about that a little bit. So what got you in the journey of getting a camera around your neck, walking the streets and making photos?
So I used to be a journalist. So I kind of still am a journalist. I do some freelance work.
Okay.
But I'm just looking out for what's happening here.
That's okay. Take your time.
Yeah, so I used to be a journalist, and I would do a lot of freelance work for magazines and newspapers, a bit of travel stuff, a bit of sort of international reportage, and the media industry isn't what it once was. So a lot of times people or publications didn't have the budget to send a staff photographer or have a freelance photographer accompany the writing.
Right.
They'd say, oh, can you send us photos? And so that's how I got into it. I started taking photos for the stories that I was writing. And slowly over time, I sort of realized that I was enjoying the photography more than I was the writing. or the same amount. So I decided to like really get into it. I mean, I didn't really know what I was doing at first. I didn't have any training, so it was all YouTube stuff. And as I said to you earlier, it was sort of like the kind of thing that I think happens to a lot of people, which is you're shooting on a decent camera that you might have picked up or found secondhand or whatever, and the photos look better than phone photos, so you think that they're good photos. And then as you start to get more and more into photography, you know, the photos you took a year ago, you realize aren't that good. And then the next year, the photos that you took the year before,
Right.
you realize they're not that good. And so, I mean, I feel like I've been taking photography really seriously for probably about 2 years now. Or street photography.
Street photography specifically. Okay. Like it's a constant journey, right? We're always learning and growing.
Exactly. And just, you know, pushing yourself to try new things. I mean, in some ways, I feel like at a certain point, it becomes less about the photography skills because it's never been easier to expose a photo correctly.
Spot on,
and it
yeah.
becomes more about where you put yourself and how you approach the photos.
I love it. I love it. You're absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, cameras these days pretty much do so much for you. So it really comes down to storytelling and picking the right moment. I also want to talk to you about your exhibition, which you did all by yourself, which I met you there for the first time. So I'd love to kind of hear that whole story. I think it's a great story for everyone to hear because I want to learn about how you went about organizing all this and what learnings you had, what you do differently and all that. So I'd love to hear more about your exhibition, Alex.
Yeah, well, actually, I can't remember how long ago it was now. It's probably like, what, 6 weeks?
6 weeks probably, yeah.
Something like
about
that?
a month and a half, 2 ago, yeah.
So I guess I've been taking photos, like I said, around Sydney for about 2 years, seriously. And I actually, this is the problem with shooting where you live. It's like you see your friends everywhere. Hey guys!
Hello.
Hey guys, this is him and I'm doing a YouTube interview.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Am I YouTube fans?
You are, yes.
This is the problem, you see people all the time. I love these Uber Eats drivers.
These guys?
Yeah. I actually like... They're kind of hard to shoot, I find, because like the high vis is so loud.
It's very bright, isn't it?
And this section of Darlinghurst Road is also like the light right now is really good, but like it's a difficult spot because there's like mottled light and
Yep.
so I'm waiting for this shot to happen. I don't think it's today. You often see these guys like fully like perched up on their bikes, like no feet on the floor. So that's what I'm waiting for.
That's what you're waiting for.
There is a shot here.
You'll get it at some point.
Anyway, what was I before we
So-
started?
You were talking about 2 months ago, 1.5 months ago, we met at
Yes.
your exhibition.
Okay, yeah, so I did this pop-up show in Marrickville, and like all good things, it started in the smoking area at the pub. At the end of last year, I met a woman called Agnetha. We started chatting. She's an interior stylist, and I showed her some of my photos, told her I was a photographer. She was like, oh, I love them. And she started buying some prints for her properties.
Right.
Putting them in those. And then at the end of last year, she said, oh, I've got this warehouse that I'm going to rent out. Sorry.
No, I was going to say that's a great moment right there.
She had this warehouse, and she was like, oh, I've got this warehouse, do you want to do a show? And I was like, oh, well, I hadn't really thought about it, but she wasn't going to charge me, so that was fantastic. And
Amazing.
I sort of felt like I had enough decentish photos that maybe I could make it work. I didn't really have a concept of what I wanted to do yet, but she was like, okay, the space is going to be gone, in about 3 weeks. So do we want to do it? And I was like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah, love it. Okay. Jump on opportunity.
So I sort of thought about like what work could I bring together to make sort of a cohesive visual experience, a show. And for whatever reason, it turned out that some of the black and white stuff I'd done around Sydney sort of seemed to work together. I haven't really decided whether I'm like a colour guy or a black and white guy or both or whatever. But this stuff seemed to work, so I sort of pulled together a short list, which I went over again over and over. Probably like really annoyed my fiance by being like this photo, that photo. But in the end got, I think, a dozen images together, or just slightly fewer than a dozen, because I also had to work with the space.
Right.
So I guess what I discovered, which is kind of interesting, is that when you're working with a space,
you kind of have to tailor your...
Exactly, but so it's like, you kind of have to do everything at once. You have to look at the space, you have to look at the work, and you have to work them together somehow. Like there's a bit of push and pull going on there. So it was like a small U-shaped space.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
And so I sort of selected the work and then looked at the space and then realized that some of the stuff might not work, and had to also work out how I'd put it together so that there was sort of a flow through it, sort of like sequencing a zine, I guess. And
how much time would you say you spend, if you can remember, on kind of picking your photos? How many times did you go to see the space, or did you kind of have an idea of how large the space was? Because to me, it's like that's a lot of admin work, right? It's a lot of research. Picking your photos alone, I mean, as an artist, we're all a little bit insecure. This is the photos I want to showcase. This is how much space I've got. This is how big this one's going to be.
And I don't know about you, but my Lightroom is an absolute mess.
Oh yeah, I know all about that. Yeah.
I would say that I probably visited the space that turned out to be the gallery, which was part of a warehouse. Essentially, it was like the like a double-sized garage for a warehouse. 4 or 5 times, and, measured it up, and thought about how it was going to work. Had to think about lighting as well. So there's all these things that are sort of
little nuances. Okay.
You wouldn't think about, or like you need to have like slightly more attention to detail than comes naturally to me.
Gotcha.
But I'm sort of lucky that I had a couple of friends who could really help me out. Like I got my friend Anthony Vieira, who's he used to be a oil painter. So he had a lot of experience in putting together kind of heaps budget like art shows.
Okay.
So he also helped me sequence the images, but then also thinking about lighting, he helped me paint the space because it had 2 white walls and 1 pink wall.
Oh, right.
And the salmon pink wall was like definitely not going to work.
No, that's not going to work. Yeah. Definitely be a clash.
So, and then even once you get into the idea of which photos are going to go in which order to fit the space, then there's also like the actual practical element of hanging them and spacing them, and also deciding what size the prints are going to be, because I had a variety of print sizes because I was hoping to sell. I had some really good advice from a friend of mine, James Dorahy, who's art advisor and art professional who I met through my work at Wallara Council. And he sort of said to me, don't do this if it's just a vanity thing. Do it because you're going to make some money and you think it's going to be good for getting the word out there about your art. And so I did think, I was like, am I just doing this because I can? I was like, no, I think it's nice to actually, especially with photography on digital cameras, like the images often just live
on a computer. Yeah.
And
on a screen, that's it.
I was like, let's get the images out and get people in, like people in the street photography community like you, my friends, you know, I did some marketing and stuff and get some random strangers as well.
Okay. Love it.
So that, like, that's why I decided to do it. I was like, let's get something out there and bring people together.
You definitely had some purpose outside of I'm just putting a gallery together. It's a mix of a few things, which is great. Like you had a bit of a plan.
Yeah.
What are your key learnings if you were to give some advice, like 2 or 3 top learnings from putting a gallery together?
Okay, top learnings. I would say in terms of printing, you need to have a good system for getting the art on the wall, which I did not have.
Okay.
So I got my stuff printed at Charing Cross Photo in Sydney. They're amazing. Ian, the printer there, is like full of advice, fantastic. He was a massive help. But I decided that to keep costs down, I mean, costs were already pretty low because I wasn't paying for the gallery space, but I didn't want to spend a huge amount on printing and framing. And like the thing is that if you start framing, that is where the expense is, right? So I was like, let's not go down the framing road. Let's get the art on the wall as raw as we can and just basically lean into this sort of pop-up gallery, low budget vibe. But by not framing the art and not putting it on, you know, like foam core mats or anything, which would also have been a pretty significant expense because some of the prints were really large. I created a massive problem for myself for getting it on the wall and
Gotcha.
considered a couple of options on how to do it, like whether I would use magnets or like strips or whatever. In the end, just ended up going with double-sided tape.
Okay.
And that might have been okay in a like perfect white room, but in a warehouse garage that has like dings out of the wall from where like trucks have hit it and stuff like that, it was not dead flat, you know.
Right.
And yeah, that's one thing I regret. So I would think
learning.
about how to do that. I'd think about magnets and weights, and probably not hang the stuff until like 2 a.m. the night before with your fiance. So I should say thank you to
Poor thing,
Hannah.
you should, yes.
In terms of other stuff, I would also say like make your pricing really clear. I sold a huge number of prints of the cheapest thing there,
Okay.
which is sort of classic, right? But I had a 4x6 print that I was selling for $25. And it was an image that suited a small setup. It was just like this little blurred chihuahua in a car. And I sold a lot of those. And I think that the way that I explained the pricing on the board that I had on the wall was not clear. I think that especially when people are coming in off the street and they're not necessarily literate about printing and photography, they don't know that any of those photos could have been done in any size. So
I see.
I should have made that clearer. I also think that I think my third thing would be I would not, for a one night exhibition, do anything huge
Right,
size.
yeah, okay.
Because I think it's quite a big ask to have someone walk in off the street or walk in for one night and drop hundreds and hundreds of dollars on a large format piece of art, because that's the kind of thing where it's not an impulse purchase, it's something that's going to be on the wall potentially for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
It might be something you want to see and come back and consider. So I think next time I would probably do more 8x12s.
That's good advice. It's a very good point.
And fewer really big, really
I know, I
big.
saw her too.
All right.
What do you think?
Yeah, I'm just here because I'm like looking at this like nice bare concrete, nice high contrast scene with a ray of light coming through it.
So would you wait here for a little while?
Yeah, usually. I think one of the things that I've really learned, especially over the last few months, is that it's all about patience and like really camping out sometimes. So yeah, a lot of the time that's how I'll spend my time.
So how would you feel? I mean, people are going to walk by. I've tried to do this stuff before where it's just like, I feel like I'm a sore thumb getting noticed. People are going to walk by and like there's a lad standing there with a camera. I'm going to have to walk through this. Does that go through your mind at all? Does it bother you? You just kind of stand there and you...
A little bit. It sort of depends on the situation, right? I often feel, I would say, more self-conscious in these situations. Here we go. Like in the city, when there's more people going past, it's less of a worry and especially because people are sort of more transient. Because here, as we saw, because I just bumped into some of my friends, I'm like shooting in my own neighborhood. I see people I know, and it's often like more of a like one-on-one type situation. Mm-hmm. You know, like I'm here standing with the camera, and there's one person walking past me, and obviously that can feel a little more awkward.
Okay.
But I kind of just try and push myself and get over it.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense. Would you wait for an interesting character? Like, is there someone specific you're looking for?
Well, actually, so this is kind of a good example because this spot, or actually just over there, where this like ray of light is coming down the alley.
Oh yeah.
A little earlier in the day, the ray of light comes and hits this wall and then sort of spotlights this area here next to the bike.
Okay.
And I probably spent about 45 minutes here the other day, waiting because I've been here before and I took a shot where there was a nun walking up from somewhere down there. And like obviously a nun is like crack to a street photographer. And so I sort of have this feeling that maybe there's like some old religious institutions or maybe a nursing home down there that the nun was visiting for whatever reason. So I was like, I missed the shot with her before because she sort of overlapped with the bike and the scene was a bit too complex. I was hoping for like something kind of like clean and elegant and human-esque. And it just didn't happen that time. So I was like, oh, maybe the nun will come past. And there's also another guy who, I'm not even quite sure how to describe how he dresses. He sort of looks like a character from a 1950s comedy.
I love that stuff.
Like he wears like suspenders, a hat, and like a polka dot red tie. And I've seen him walking up and down here because I think he's a musician. I think he plays at the same nursing home type spaces that I was talking about. So I was waiting for either him or a nun to come past, and it didn't happen. But yeah, I will often spend a bit of time, and I think that the thing about, because I'm like really shooting in this neighborhood, it's where I live, and I'm trying to build up a bit of a body of work here, is that nowadays I'll sort of see spots and I'll sort of like log them and think, okay, this is a place I have to come back to at this time. I've got all these little spots, like where we were before, next to Holy Moly. There's a mural of a guy who's looking as if out onto a fairway with his hand like this. And I think if I get there early enough in the morning, there will be sun hitting him and there will be someone who walks past also shielding their eyes. So I'm like waiting for that kind of thing.
Interesting. So you kind of, if I'm correct in this, let me know, you have ideas in mind before you leave the house. You've seen stuff around, you've got locations, you've got ideas, and you're trying to go out and hopefully they play out. Yes,
I definitely work like that. But then I will also, you know, like we all do, react to the circumstances. Like there's lots and lots of interesting characters in King's Cross. Like, and I love these.
The old photos?
The old photos as well.
I've tried to also create some stuff with this, but yet to be successful.
It's hard, isn't it? Because it's like,
it's black and white old Sydney, right? And if you get the right person walking by in the right situation, it might create like that's an actual background, and that person is in an old background.
But then at times it can, like, if you don't get it quite right, like every photo I've ever taken trying to do it, it can just be like a bit hard to pass visually because you're like, what am I actually looking at here? Okay, here we go. Here's a old lady with a dog who's going to walk through here. So
Try not to put too much attention on you.
We need to do it.
Risking his life for a photo, Alex. Just kidding. I mean, this might be worth it after all. I was jokingly saying you're risking your life for a photo, but
yeah, try not to get run over live on YouTube.
this would be a bad episode of Coffee and Cameras. That was a good choice of a character though. Like, she was really well dressed. The dog was interesting. You got a really nice background as well. So hopefully that will turn out. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, pretty good. I think that I sometimes think, have you ever seen that meme that is like the galaxy brain, or like Vince McMahon from WrestleMania, where it's like, you know, like there are levels to the game, so it's like he's looking normal.
Oh yeah.
The head expands, the head expands, the head expands. I sort of feel like nice person, like nicely dressed person walking past is like the base level of street photography.
Right.
And then you've got like nicely dressed person walking past in good light. And then you've got like nicely dressed person walking past and something's actually happening. And then like nicely dressed person walking past and something's actually happening in good light.
In good light.
So that's the dream. That's the dream.
I was going to ask you something else about what you just said. I was going to ask you, so do you ever review your photos on the back of the screen? Or...
of course I do.
Okay.
I mostly try not to.
Okay. There's no right or wrong answer.
I know there's not, but there's chimp shame. You know, like, so yeah, I mostly try not to. Like, I'll sometimes, most of the time what I'll do is if I'm like out somewhere, I'll review them on the bus or whatever on the way home. I don't look at them straight afterwards unless it's a very like still shot, something that's maybe like a bit more architecture-y.
Okay.
And like what I'm looking for is like to check that the exposure is correct or whatever, so I can redo it. That's when I'll really look at photos.
I'm
just going to come down and like have a look at this Marilyn Monroe mural that I was talking about.
I'll try to get you back in the frame. So this is what I think about, maybe too much, but what do you hope to get from photography, like future-wise? What do you think it will take you, or where do you want to take it? Have you thought about that?
Should we walk down this round?
Yeah, sure.
I often think like more interesting stuff happens down the roundabout alleys.
Let's go. There's Marilyn Monroe.
It's so funny because
No sun on her now, so I'm off it. Where do I want it to take me? Where do I think it will take me?
Or where do you want to take it?
This is kind of cool. Like, I don't know if I'll...
Kitty cats.
I mean, this is cool. I think there's like... It's funny because I think we often think about photography through like... we can't help but think about photography. This is like, I'm fully distracted now, but...
It's okay.
Through Instagram, which is this like publishing platform that has trained us to think about publishing photography
Right.
in the Instagram way.
Yep.
So like it's like absolutely pathetic, but I was just taking those photos just then, and I'm like, oh, this is not like grid stuff, you know. This is a story. But I think
You think in those terms sometimes.
I guess so. I guess I'm trained to think in those terms, but I think that maybe like a less sad case way to think about that is that there are like loud and quiet shots, and especially if you're doing a project where you're documenting an area, which is sort of what I'm trying to do around King's Cross, then you need both.
Yeah.
Maybe like a photograph of someone's window, of their like little interior design choice that is spilling out onto the street can be just as important as the crazy photo of crazy stuff happening down on Bayswater Road or on Darlinghurst Road.
Right.
What was the question?
I think you answered it, the question.
What do I want to go?
Where do you want to take? Well,
okay.
no, you didn't actually. No, you didn't answer. Sorry. Where do you want to take photography?
Okay, where would I really like to take photography? I would. I mean, this sounds a bit grandiose. But like, I would really like to get to the top of the street photography game and bring out a book one day that I can be really proud of.
Okay.
So it's not. I guess it's not really about what I achieve in street photography, but I would like to have images that I am proud of, which I have a few. But you know, as I said before, it's like the images you took last year. You're like, oh my god, I can't believe I thought that was good. So I hope that in 10 years' time, then maybe there's a few images that do not suffer from that process.
I'm sure there won't be. You might be a little bit too harsh on yourself. Okay, that's kind of where you want to go with it. Somewhere where you can have a book out, you have images that you're really proud of, and maybe get to a point, if I'm recapping this correctly, that when you look back at your images, you don't feel like they could be improved. You're like, you know what? I'm actually happy with that. That was a great photo.
Yeah, but I also think there's also something exciting about thinking, like I think I'm still very much a beginner, and that my best images are definitely still to come.
Yet to come. Love it. Very humble. Love it. Okay.
So that's like a good place to be in some ways. This is like the
classic.
The fountain, which I'm like, sometimes when I'm lacking inspiration.
You've got a couple of photos of pigeons out here.
Yes. So this is in your wheelhouse.
I love pigeons. Yes, I'm honestly thinking about this would be a great. You know, it's backlit. Anyway,
and so like it works at different times of day as well, because you get morning light coming in here and afternoon light coming in here, depending on the time of day. And so I've got one of the images that I showed at the pop-up show was some ibises in the fountain, and I mean the bird shots are always kind of patient shots as well, because you can't control them.
Yep. I wish I could.
I mean, you can chase them. You can try.
Trust me, I have done it. I have done it many times. Amazing.
But sometimes, when things aren't working with human beings, I'll come down and try and get
a bit of inspiration
shots.
from this. This is actually beautiful. Yeah.
I've got a pigeon shot. I've got an ibis shot. I'm waiting for the seagull shot so I can have the triptych.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. So what are you working on project-wise? You said you're working on kind of documenting King's Cross a little bit?
Yeah, so I'm I have these very, very loose plans to do some sort of zine later this year.
So happy to hear that. Yeah.
Just with King's Cross stuff. I was actually my first thought around it was to do colour stuff, because I felt like I'd been on a real run with colour photography
Okay.
here in the Cross, but then and I met up with Perry, who people probably know, the 3-shot, and Streets Australia. He's also doing a zine about the Cross because he's coming out here.
I saw him last weekend when we were out chatting.
In
Yeah.
the afternoons. His photos are like really different to mine. Like they, I mean, it's really cool actually when you like talk to someone else. You've been in the same area, but your shots are so different.
Very different. I'm sure. Yeah.
But he's going to do black and white stuff. I don't know. I'll think about it. Obviously, like I wouldn't want to bring something out. I'm probably getting too into the weeds with this, but I wouldn't bring something out that was black and white at the same time as him, distract from what he's already been planning on doing.
It's relevant. I think it's relevant. But I want to pick your brain on the color versus black and white. So you said this earlier as well, and thank you for reminding me. You're not so sure if you're black and white or color or both. Tell me more about this.
Yeah, I don't really like.
What draws you in? Like what? Yeah.
This is like kind of goes back to what I was just saying in the alley, right? Is that like I think to a certain extent, Instagram has like poisoned all of our brains and the way that we think about our photography. So yeah, look at this backlight. Woo!
Wow.
So like there's a lot of pressure to have a very cohesive, identifiable, marketable style.
Right.
And I think that style is more than a Lightroom preset. You know what I mean? People like, oh, I'm developing my own style, and it's actually just a post-production look.
Yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah. It's like a color preset that they've created, and they think to them that's what their signature look or style is.
Yeah, and I mean that can be. I mean that's. You can do that. You can look like if you look at someone like Josh Edgegoose, like Spicy Meatball on Instagram, who has those like beautiful pastel-y photos of in England. It's like it's a look, but it's also a style. Anyway, but I guess what I'm saying is that like part of me is like I need to decide what my look is so that my Instagram feed is consistent. But then another part of me is like, that's bullshit.
That's what I agree with. Yes, that is.
So I guess I'm drawn to both. I really love shooting for black and white. But I'm also really attracted to colors, and I would say that like the photographers that I like, there's like I like both, you know?
Yeah, that's totally fine. That's wrong with it. I'm just curious to know more about your thought process there, because I mean personally, I don't think, and hopefully this won't come back and haunt me in the future. I'll never
Let's
ever.
walk this way. There's a lady coming along in a red dress, so I might want to snap in front of the family.
Yeah. Planning already, love it. I don't think I'll ever do color. I love black and white. There's just something about it that I would not ever enjoy. Like as much as I love sunsets and sunrises, and real life is in color obviously, but from a photography perspective, for me, I think it's always going to be black and white.
Yeah, I mean, you're also really, really bloody good at it. Like your images are amazing. So
far too kind. Thank you. Where's the lady in the red dress? We miss her?
Oh, she's bloody turned off.
Cross.
Maybe she popped into the. I don't know. Anyway, all right, back up.
Back that way. Is there anything else that you want to talk about, Alex, that I haven't asked you? Anything important to you?
I think that one element that I think and that I've been thinking about a lot is what we talked about last week when we were here in King's Cross, which is talking about, I guess, what you're documenting and what is appropriate to photograph, which I think is something that I think about all the time here, particularly because like King's Cross has so many like services for people with like mental health issues, drug users, stuff like that. So there's often a lot of people out on the street who are not well, having a bad day, or live on the street. And I think it's like quite an interesting and difficult
subject matter?
Subject because I think, you know, you said last week, like I would never shoot that. It's your choice. And that was absolutely initially my attitude was that it's not really appropriate to shoot people who live on the street because they have nowhere else to go. But the more I've spent time shooting King's Cross, I'm like, well, I wouldn't really be telling the story of the place if I didn't shoot people who are doing it tough. It's like a big part of the character of this part of the city.
It's funny, I was
part of the story, you're absolutely right, yeah.
But then at the same time, I'm not a photojournalist. I'm not, I mean, it's a documentary project, but I'm not, I'm like still trying to create something artistic. And so what about my desire to create art that is not going to have any tangible positive outcome? At least a photojournalist can say like, oh, my story, you know, like led to better outcomes for people. Like if I bring out a zine of photos of people in King's Cross, it's not going to have any effect on anything. It's going to tell the story of what was here in some way. But I'm like, what about my desire to do that justifies or can possibly justify taking those photos? So that's something that I'm really grappling with right now. And like I've got some photos that I've taken that I haven't used or shown. And like, I don't know if I ever will. I don't know. Like I'm not the kind of photographer who rushes in and
perfectly great.
But I think it's like important to think about it at least.
Absolutely. I think the fact that you've given it this much thought shows how much respect you have for the people who are part of our society who are unfortunately in the streets, and you're being respectful to them. So I appreciate that. I'm sure so will others. And I don't think, again, in your scenario, there's a right or wrong answer. I think if you were documenting King's Cross and that's part of the identity of this suburb, I think it should be in there. But if you're also not ready for it to decide, then that's totally fine. Take your time with that. There's no rush.
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna have to say, like, I've got a couple, like, I've got this photo of a, like, I don't think it's like, in the context of a zine, I think would be a good photo. I don't think it's a photo that is like an on-the-wall standalone photo.
Right.
But of a guy passed out on the street and like under a sign that says like, Polly needs assistance. Anyway, it's sort of like kind of funny but kind of sad and a pretty raw image. And I don't know, I guess that's the thing. It's also about context, how you put things together.
Right.
It's like, if you just splash these things, then that can be insensitive. But if it's part of a wider story, then perhaps it's allowable.
Yeah. It's all what you mean with it, what you're trying to do with it, what goals you have with it, and I completely agree with everything you said. It's spot on. So
there's like no right answer in these things, I guess. It's like, but this is, I guess, the difficult thing with all art. And there's lots of different examples you could take about art controversies and stuff, but you can't really have art and hard and fast rules, because like if the art is good enough, which is so subjective,
very,
then you can kind of do anything, you know? Like I think this is now we're getting into like some problematic stuff, but I think about this like with, say, cultural appropriation, which is, you know, something that people get very upset about. But nobody gets upset when it's done well. It's possible for a writer to tell a story about someone from a different culture, and if they have taken the time to understand and tell a story from somebody's perspective, nobody objects to that. Right. What people object to is people doing it cheaply.
Yeah. I understand. Yeah, it's. I think to me, that's a really good example. I think about the comedians. A lot of them try to push the boundaries when it comes to what's appropriate to say and what's funny. I personally agree that there shouldn't really be a limit of what you make fun of. But obviously, if that joke's coming from someone who is bigoted, then obviously it's a bigoted joke. But if it's coming from someone who is understanding and open-minded and they're just making a joke to make someone laugh, I have no issues with that. So I completely get where you're coming from. It's the same scenario, applying it to street photography. Homelessness shouldn't be photographed, in my opinion, because that's where people live. They're homeless, that's their living room. And then I'm just, talking to everyone, I think everyone agrees for the most part that's how it should be, unless you put the lens on that this is going to be a story highlighting this specific problem in a part of town, or a story that you're putting into a zine and part of the identity of this place. So I completely with you on this.
There's some element of it that's about the treatment. Like I saw actually a photo the other day from a guy who's like has a lot of Instagram followers anyway. And it was just a cruel photograph. It wasn't of a homeless person, but it was a cruel photograph that was essentially making fun of somebody for their body.
Oh wow, that is pretty cool. Okay.
And I was like,
why?
Like,
what's the point?
What's the point? Like, yeah. Like, that's the kind of thing that's like where if you're like, maybe it's funny. There is like cruelty can unfortunately be funny. That's why comedians like to push boundaries. But when it's like there's this like power dynamic of you just like making fun of somebody on the street, like what gives you the right? It's like, it's gross.
Yeah, I agree. That's not appropriate. Nah, that's just, it's rude. Just
I'll
rude.
show you the photo after the interview.
Awesome. Do you want to get walking?
Yeah.
Anything else you want to talk about?
No, nothing in particular, I don't think. I feel like I haven't taken that many photos.
That can happen.
Bagging too much.
That can definitely happen. Well, thanks, Alex. Really appreciate your time coming out twice, 2 weekends, chatting with me.
You came out here. I'm in my backyard.
That's okay. It's my pleasure. And let's grab another coffee maybe.